Tennessee Titans training camp is less than a week away, and it's time for T'Vondre Sweat to step it up. I'll explain why on today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs and the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. We are continuing our positional preview series. Titans training camp is less than a week away. We've talked about the secondary with the cornerbacks and the safeties. Now it's time to talk about the interior defensive line, and T'Vondre Sweat needs to step it up. Also, Jeffery Simmons is still elite and needs to be treated as such. And then finally, I am very concerned about the depth on the interior defensive line for the Titans. Before we get into all of that, do want to thank you for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. You're not going to beat that anywhere else. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Titans podcast. And speaking of every day, shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. If you aren't an everydayer, you need to be one. Again, it's year-round free Titans content. There's a reason this is the number one Tennessee Titans podcast in the world. And with the season kicking off, you don't want to miss a single episode. If you missed any of the offensive positional previews, I did those last week. Go back and check those out. But coming up, we're going to do edge tomorrow and then linebacker to finish out the week. And then my 53-man roster prediction will be out at the start of next week, getting you guys ready to go for Titans training camp. So much coming your way. My Roger McCreary film breakdown is out now on the Tic Tac Titans film channel. Football season is here, folks, so strap in. But with that being said, with training camp being here, maybe the number one player who needs to step it up is T'Vondre Sweat, the Tennessee Titans' second-round pick. Now, I feel like I have to give this disclaimer anytime I talk about T'Vondre Sweat at this point, but I did not like the pick. It was out there. Everyone knows my feelings on the pick. But here's a reality. Whether we like the pick, didn't like the pick, blah, 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 the Titans need T'Vondre Sweat. The Titans need T'Vondre Sweat to be a second-round level player. The Titans need T'Vondre Sweat to be an instant starter for this team. They need T'Vondre Sweat to be an instant impact player for this team, and that means he needs to step it up. T'Vondre Sweat needs to be out on the practice field. He missed nearly all of the practices during the summer workouts, okay? And to some people, that's no big deal. No big deal. Hey, it's just the summer stuff. If he's there for training camp, that's what really matters. Okay, well, it's time for training camp. Training camp is here. So now with all the people who were telling me, oh, that stuff doesn't matter, it's all about training camp. Well, now is the time that all of us collectively need to turn our eyes to T'Vondre Sweat, and the expectations must go up. He needs to be out on the field. We were told by the organization, Brian Callahan specifically, that T'Vondre Sweat's injury, I'm doing the little finger quotation marks because I have a theory that it wasn't actually an injury that was keeping him off the field necessarily, a physical thing, but maybe not an injury. But we were told that it was a short-term injury and that he should be good for training camp. Brian Callahan said he may even be good to go for the final week of OTAs. He wasn't out there. So we were told that it was a short-term injury that should not impact him for training camp. He should be ready to go. So if T'Vondre Sweat isn't out there for the first day of practice at training camp, now we start to hit the alarm bells, okay? It's not a full-on panic. Doesn't mean he's going to be a bust, blah, blah, blah. But again, my thought process here comes from the fact that the Tennessee Titans need him. They need him desperately to be a good player. So it's not just about his individual value and whether he's a bust or whether he's this or blah, 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 blah. It's about the team. The Titans need T'Vondre Sweat to be great. One, they don't have another good, pure nose tackle. I hate the Titans' interior defensive line group right now. Especially the depth is awful. And we'll talk about that at the end of the show, how concerned that makes me and the names that are available here. But that makes it even more important for T'Vondre Sweat to not only be out on the field, but play well. Okay, they need him not just to be out there, but to be a starter, but to be an impact player. That is absolutely critical. And you could say whatever you want, but missing that time hurts from a conditioning standpoint. It hurts from a readiness standpoint. It hurts from a competition standpoint for the offensive line. There are multiple reasons why missing those summer OTAs. Think about how great J.C. Latham's looked during that time period. All right. And all of the positive vibes surrounding J.C. Latham based on what he did on the field, off the field, all of that during OTAs. T'Vondre Sweat's been the exact opposite. Okay. And that leads me to my theory here. I think that there's a chance that T'Vondre Sweat wasn't injured. He was just out of shape. They had him out there on the practice field, and he was out of shape. And they're like, look, rather than have you on the practice field, we're going to have you in the building. We're going to work on your diet. We're going to work specifically on conditioning and getting you down to the weight that you need to play at, which is something that they've talked about a ton in the press conferences with T'Vondre Sweat previous. So I think there's a chance that he wasn't actually injured per se, but they were just so laser focused on getting his conditioning right and getting him down to the weight that he needs to play at that it just wasn't worth it putting him out on the field in case he got injured. So if that has any, whether that's true or not, whether my theory is right or not, either way, he was not out on the field. And now he needs to be. And now he needs to make up for lost time. And now he needs to show that he can be a starter and an impact player from day one next to Jeffery Simmons. I've been doing locks, bubbles, long shots. There really aren't enough interior defensive linemen to flesh out two categories. But the reality is T'Vondre Sweat is a lock to make this team. And now that he is a lock to make this team, he's got to be a big part of it. It's not about me and liking the pick or anything else anymore. The Tennessee Titans need T'Vondre Sweat. Period. So leave the individual stuff aside from a team perspective. He's got to step it up, and he's got to be ready to play for training camp like we were told that he was going to be. So this isn't meant to be more hate on T'Vondre Sweat. This is meant to highlight just how important he is to this team and how important it is that he steps it up in training camp. But with that being said, we got to talk about the other two locks on the interior defensive line. And one of those is, well, one of the best football players in the entire league, Jeffery Simmons, who is absolutely elite. And even though he's had a down end of the year the last few years, people in the NFL still know how good Big Jeff is. So we'll talk about that. But before we do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Look, I love sports. I think that's pretty obvious. If you follow me on Twitter, Tic Tac Titans, or you just hear me talk about anything, it's all I really care about. I love them so much that I never want sports to stop. But the reality is during the summer, things do slow down. We get fewer games and the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app, dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. Like a Reese Hines home run. What an incredible start to a career for the new Reds call-up, Reese Hines. What if you want to get in early on some Tennessee Titans action? You can do that on FanDuel. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official betting partner of Major League Baseball. Titans fans, let's continue today's breakdown of the interior defensive line position for the Tennessee Titans. Less than a week away from Tennessee Titans training camp, it is time for Tavondre Sweat to step up. But he's not the only interior defensive lineman we got to talk about. Obviously, Jeffery Simmons is the best player on the team. So we're going to talk about Big Jeff, the other lock on the interior defensive line, and then we'll finish up the show talking about the bubble guys who have me a bit concerned at the end of the day. But before I get into all of that, I do want to thank you again for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Tomorrow, we are going to be doing the Edge group, which also has me just a little bit concerned, and then we'll finish up the week with linebackers. I'll start off next week with my 53-man roster predictions heading into the first day of Titans training camp on Tuesday. First practice is on Wednesday, so I'll be recapping that on Wednesday night for you guys. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day. Also, my Roger McCreary film breakdown out on the Tic Tac Titans film channel. I would appreciate if you guys go check that out as well. But in a recent ranking, so it's list season. We're a couple of weeks away. ESPN has been doing all their rankings, all their top 10s at each position from scouts, executives, players, coaches, blah, 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 all that included. And Jeff Simmons came in as the fourth best interior defensive lineman in the NFL. Chris Jones, Quinnen Williams, Dexter Lawrence were ahead of him. Last year, Big Jeff was number 3. Okay? But I would imagine that his lack of production at the end of the year in 2022 when he was real injured and banged up, and then last year, it's my opinion, I've said this all along, the Tennessee Titans decided to shut down Jeffery Simmons after they were out of playoff contention. It was blatantly obvious that that's what happened. Like, hey, we're eliminated from the playoffs. We have a $100 million player who we just gave a big contract to. We're not going to jeopardize him long-term, get injured, playing in games that don't really matter, okay? So Jeff Simmons out for the last few games at the end of last year, hurt at the end of the year in 2022. His production dipped for both of those reasons, and that has caused him to dip down one spot. But let me tell you this. A healthy, motivated Jeffery Simmons is the second best interior defensive lineman in the entire NFL. Chris Jones is the only guy who's better. It's Big Jeff. And the fact that he's had that dip in production at the end of the last 2 seasons and he's still considered number 4 in the NFL by scouts and executives, that tells you just how good folks think he is. Big Jeff is still an absolute game wrecker. Now, what I want from Jeff, he's incredible against the run. We know that. But what I want from him is more consistency in the pass rush. So Jeffery Simmons will have these blow-up games, 3 sacks here, 2.5 sacks here, blah, 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 blah. But the consistency just has not been there. And the end of the season tail off has been there. I have continued to say that once Jeffery Simmons gets over 10 sacks in a season, he will be considered the best interior defensive lineman in the league. Maybe not with Chris Jones being a Hall of Famer, but at least number 2. And Chris Jones is an older player, so it wouldn't be long before Jeffery Simmons would be the best interior defensive lineman in the entire NFL if he were just able to put up consistent double-digit sacks each year. So I need Big Jeff to get over 10 sacks this season. You pair that with the ferocity in the run game, the leadership. Also, Big Jeff did an interview recently where he talked about like mental health struggles and being willing to cry and being okay with being an emotional man and how that, and I love everything that Big Jeff is about. Like the trajectory that we're on right now, Jeffery Simmons is going to be one of my top 5 favorite Tennessee Titans of all time. I love Big Jeff. I'm a big fan. Him and KB have led the defense for forever. Obviously, KB gets traded last year, but Big Jeff is the leader that this team and this defense needs. He is fierce. I love how he talks crap to everybody out there. He can't even say what he says out on the field in public because it's so, I mean, we got a little glimpse of it when he was telling one of the offensive linemen on the Falcons that they were completely overpaid. You know what I mean? You're overpaid. You're overpaid. That is, boy, that's quite the cut right there. But look, Jeff needs to step it up this year and finish out the season just as strong as he starts the season. Like that has to happen. That's what elite players do. They stay elite all year long. So Big Jeff is absolutely phenomenal. The best player on the entire roster. But He does need to finish stronger this year to prove that he's worth the contract that the Tennessee Titans gave him. They need him. They're going to need him, especially with the lack of talent on the interior defensive line, because Sweat is a lock, but who knows what we're going to get from him right now. Big Jeff, obviously, is a lock to make the roster. And the only other guy that I think is a lock to make the roster is Sebastian Joseph Day, who the Titans added in free agency. 6'4", 310, played 71 games in the NFL, had 68 starts in those 71 games, has had 229 tackles in his career, 21 tackles for loss, 11 sacks. When Sebastian Joseph Day was signed, my first thought was nose tackle. He could be the Titans' nose. And I talked about it on yesterday's show when we talked about cornerbacks, but the Titans are going to play majority of the time in nickel defense, where they only have 4 down defensive linemen. And when you do that, what you would primarily want is a 3-technique defensive tackle, Jeffery Simmons, he's your 3 technique, okay? And then you would want your nose tackle, the guy who's over the center, in the gaps between the center and the guard, a shade, nose tackle right there. And you need somebody who can take on 2 blocks at the same time. We know Big Jeff can do that, but that's the only way that you're going to be able to stop the run in nickel. That's the way the Titans did it so well in 2022. You had Tier Tart playing well, taking on 2 blocks at a time. Jeffery Simmons takes on 2 blocks at a time. And now the Titans linebackers can roam free and can make plays, and they can stop the run in nickel, even if you have 2 tight ends on the field. That's a cheat code in the NFL nowadays. So I was thinking Sebastian Joseph Day as a nose tackle, but clearly with the draft pick of T'Vondre Sweat, the Titans don't necessarily want to use Sebastian Joseph Day like that. They might want to use him as more of a defensive end. And I don't mean a defensive end like a hand-in-the-dirt pass rusher on a 4-man line. I mean like a 5-man front. Jeffery Simmons is the defensive tackle. T'Vondre Sweat is the nose tackle. Sebastian Joseph Day is the defensive end. So that's what I would be looking for from Sebastian Joseph Day, a guy who can move up and down the offensive line or defensive line. He absolutely can still play nose tackle. I think he's still going to get a ton of snaps at nose tackle as well, because he definitely has a little bit more, what I want to call it. He has a little bit more pass rush versatility than T'Vondre Sweat does right now. And obviously veteran player compared to a rookie. There are going to be some times where you want Sebastian Joseph Day out there as your pass rusher. I think that in 4-man fronts on 3rd downs, you would rather have Sebastian Joseph Day with Jeffery Simmons than T'Vondre Sweat early on in Sweat's career, until he can kind of work on his pass rush, staying low out of his gate, using more power in his pass rush, which is something that I've talked about and been misquoted on as well. But I think Sebastian Joseph Day is an important piece here. I don't know that he's much more than just your average NFL starter. I don't think he's above average in any way, but his versatility to go up and down the defensive line, his experience, I think that's absolutely critical for the Titans, and the lack of depth and talent they have on the interior defensive line is going to be a very important player. So my locks, T'Vondre Sweat, Big Jeff, Sebastian Joseph Day. The 3 starters are the only 3 locks, and the depth, man, the depth certainly has me concerned. And I'm going to talk about that here when we go over our bubble guys. Before I do, though, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. All right, guys, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively seeking a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, they might not have the time or the resources to hire, and that's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast, breaking down the interior defensive line group. We've talked about T'Vondre Sweat needing to step it up. We talked about Big Jeff still being elite, Sebastian Joseph Day being versatile. But now I want to talk about the depth on the interior defensive line because it is honestly a big concern in my opinion. Before I get into it, though, do want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Also want to remind you that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's now also available on Amazon Fire TV. It's called Locked On Sports Today. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day. You get coverage of every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app, and of course, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. But let's talk about the bubble. There aren't any long shots, really, because how could there be? There's only 7 interior defensive linemen on the team. I think they'll keep 6. So, everybody's got a shot at this point, but, well, there's 8. Okay, there's 8. So we'll talk about 5 guys here, including the 3 that we already discussed. But obviously you have Keandre Coburn, who was with T'Vondre Sweat. Now, Keandre Coburn, to me, not a good enough player to be on an NFL roster. But here's what we have to think about. One of the reasons the Titans took T'Vondre Sweat is because they thought they had mentorship around, whether it be Tracy Rocker, the Titans defensive line coach, whether it be Big Jeff as the leader of the defense, and another guy who had his own issues coming out of college that he's worked through. But Keandre Coburn, again, was considered a big brother to T'Vondre Sweat when they were together at Texas. And I think for that reason, Keandre Coburn's going to make the roster. And I think it's frustrating for me because it's a player who I don't think is good enough to be on an NFL roster. But because T'Vondre Sweat is so risky, they have to keep a player around on the roster who doesn't deserve it because he basically needs to be T'Vondre Sweat's babysitter. All right, that has been something that kind of sticks in my craw a little bit. But Keandre Coburn is somebody who I do think is going to make the roster, but he could be beat out if he was significantly worse than the other options. But the problem is I don't think that he's significantly worse than the other options because I think all the other options are bad too. So you have TK McClendon. Like, Keandre Coburn is a guy who's going to play really interior. He could be a nose tackle. He could play some 3 tech. TK McClendon is a guy who we should look at as more of a defensive end in their 5-man front. He's a guy who's probably going to be a pure backup to Sebastian Joseph Day, kind of in the same place that Danico Autry played last year. They did give him a 2-year deal, non-guaranteed money on that second year, so it's really a 1-year deal. But TK McClendon is a guy who has been, noticed at least by the Titans front office and by the Titans coaching staff. One of the things that I do want to point out is he missed a lot of those summer practices at the end with an injury. So TK McClendon needs to be back out on the field. He's not good enough to be a guy who you wait for. So I really want to see the Titans churn the bottom of this group. I want to see them get rid of some of these guys, bring in some other guys. But will they do that? I don't know. Are they going to find anybody who's better at this point? I don't know. It's going to be tough. Another guy like Keandre Coburn is Quinton Bohanna, was with the Titans last year, had some okay moments. He's a run-stuffing, nose tackle, interior defensive lineman type. Honestly, just like with Keandre Coburn, I don't think that Quinton Bohanna is good enough to be on an NFL roster. The Titans picked up both those guys around the same time last year. Brought them in. I don't know if they started on the practice squad. I think they started practice squad before getting called up. But both of these guys are practice squad level players. So they can fight with each other. But I think ultimately what's going to tip the scale to Coburn is that he can babysit T'Vondre Sweat. That's not really fair to Quinton Bohanna, but that's the reality. And then finally, you have Marlon Davidson here. He's another guy who you've probably heard of, been with the team a few times here and there. And I just have to say it's another guy who I think is only a practice squad level player. I don't think he's an NFL level player certified. So the Titans don't really have any NFL level interior defensive linemen outside of their top 3, and that's concerning to me. Now, one guy I do want to keep an eye on, and I think he's more of the TK McClendon role than he would be the Quinton Bohanna, Keandre Coburn, Marlon Davidson role, is Isaiah Eiton. He's an undrafted free agent out of Rutgers, 6'2", 277 pounds. So he is on the lighter side. He would probably need to put on some weight, but he's a fast player. He's an explosive player for his size. The strength is really where you want to see it improve. He's going to need to put on some weight. He's going to need to play stronger if he's going to play on the interior defensive line. But he's got good versatility. He's kind of a tweener between a 5'3" defensive end and a 3'4" outside linebacker. I think that what the Titans are going to want to do is they're going to put some more weight on Aiton and try to play him as an interior defensive lineman, again, in that kind of defensive end role in a 5-man front with TK McClendon as someone who he'll be competing against. So that'll be interesting to watch on the low end. But honestly, like I said, I hope the Titans churn the bottom of this position group, get in some new faces, and might luck out and, get some NFL talent here as some backup. So overall, not very happy with the interior defensive line group outside of Jeffery Simmons. We'll see what happens in training camp, though, when we put the pads on. But tomorrow, we're going to live on the edge, talk about the edge rusher group. So make sure that you tune in for that. And, of course, check out my Roger McCreary film breakdown on the Tic Tac Titans YouTube channel. If you haven't checked that out yet, I would definitely appreciate it. But as always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.